All right, well, hello and welcome to How to Select Your Next Data Protection Platform. Now, today's exciting PanelCast webinar is sponsored by Rubrik and cast by Veeam and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name's Jess Steinbuck. I'm with Actual Tech Media, and I am so happy to be your moderator for this PanelCast today because PanelCasts are fun. We get to take a topic and we get to dig in with some expert help. And listen, we hear at ATM from you folks all the time that you're struggling to find the right product or to maybe evaluate the differences between one solution to the next. And that's what we want to dig into today. So why should your organization think about upgrading your data protection platform? What are the risks if you don't? What are the opportunities if you do? And how, most importantly, do you even go about making this choice? That could maybe feel a bit big, scary, or overwhelming purely because of the variety of options that are out there for us, which is really a great problem to have, I guess. And that's why today we have some help. We are going to answer all of these questions and maybe a few more that you had not even thought to ask yourself yet. Okay, so let's zip through our PanelCast housekeeping, and then we can get into our sessions with our expert speakers, and I'm very excited to get into that. All right, so let's start by taking a little bit of a tour of your audience console. Now, the very first thing that I want to point out is the questions tab. This is a very important one, and then we're going to talk about your handouts tab, another very important stop on our tour. All right, so looking at the questions tab. Now, today, you have the chance to ask questions directly of two awesome experts, and we want to hear from you all. So send in those questions, send in your thoughts, your ideas, your general wonderings and wonderments, and hey, your Good Friday vibes, bring it on. We want to hear it all. You can also use that questions tab to get in touch with the Actual Tech Media team. So if any tech issues come up today, knock on wood, I do want to remind you all that a quick browser refresh is usually going to do the trick. But if that doesn't work and that problem is still persisting, just shoot us a message in that questions tab and our crew is here to help you out. All right, so I mentioned the second stop on our guided tour this morning was going to be your handouts tab. So let's take a quick look into that handouts tab and start clicking around. You're going to find some great resources to go along with our panel cast today. Check out some upcoming webinars, read through the Gorilla Guide Book Club, and be sure to click on both the Rubrik and Cast by Veeam links and start exploring. There's some great resources there for you. All right, it's not just awesome content that we are giving away today. We also have a $250 Amazon gift card as a prize drawing at the end of our webinar. Of course, you do need to be here live in attendance at the PanelCast in order to win, and all winners must meet the Actual Tech Media prize terms and conditions. If you are saying to yourself, sounds great, but I don't know what those are, no problem. We have the full T's and C's linked for you right there in that handouts tab that we were just looking at. So click in, scroll down, and you will find that there for you. All right, well, that is it for our housekeeping information. So I think it's time that we get into our session here. To kick us off, I am so excited to introduce Mark Crevera, Technical Product Manager at Rubrik, and Matt LeBlanc, Senior Systems Engineer at Cast by Veeam. Now, Mark and Matt, I'm going to get you out here with me. Just one second. Ta-da! Expert speakers, Mark and Matt, thank you so much for joining us here today on the PanelCast. I am really looking forward to getting into this conversation, but I'm wondering if we can start out with sort of a quick introduction. So if you could each tell us a little bit about yourself, your role, and what you're excited to dig into today with our audience. And Matt, maybe let's start with you, and then we'll head on over to Mark.
Sure. I've spent my entire life in basically in technology related to the data center. Long tenure at EMC with storage, basically ended up in data protection. And then almost 4 years ago, I got pulled into the world of Kubernetes, which is really where I've focused on for data protection. Systems engineer covering North America and US and Eastern Canada, Eastern US.
Great. And my name is Mark Crevier. I'm a technical product manager here at Rubrik. And like a lot of folks, I started out in the trenches. I remember I've been hands-on IT for about 25 years now. And my first job included managing that tape rotation where we had tapes in each individual physical server.
How many servers?
To exponentially larger tape libraries. and about 2 years ago joined Rubrik, and it's an advisory role helping make sure that our products are as useful as possible to you who are consuming and using them.
I can empathize with the backup role. That was one of my first system admin jobs, and I think it was in the mid '90s, and I had over 100 servers that I had to back up, which is small peanuts compared to what is managed today.
Yeah,
I'm glad tape's gone.
Yeah, fair. All right. Well, let's dig into our panel cast and get things rolling today. I also want to say we have I'm seeing a lot of the Wisconsin crew out there. So Mark is very pro Detroit style pizza. This is an important thing for all of you to know out there. So if the Wisconsin crew would like to chime in on their feelings about Michigan and Illinois pizza, please feel free to jump in on that. This is an important part of this panel cast discussion today. Mark would love to discuss that with you.
Can we wait till the middle to derail it?
Instantly derailed. We haven't even gotten started yet, and we're down the rabbit hole. Good point, Mark. Let's start with some information and then we'll derail entirely. All right. Well, Mark, see, Eric says Chicago pizza. The debate is started. Sorry, we're already gone. It's too far gone. All right, Mark, I'm going to kick this to you then. What are the greatest challenges that you are seeing around data management and protection right now?
Well, this is going to be, I think, a recurring theme throughout the discussion today is the threat of ransomware, right? Making sure that, are my systems really protected? Because in an attack situation, one of the first things they're doing after they get access to your system is they're going after the backups. So resiliency of that data protection and making sure that it's recoverable, because it's bad enough that attacks are still getting through and putting that data at risk. If they're able to attack your last line of defense, your data protection, then you're really in trouble. So I'd say that's the biggest challenge that we're seeing right now.
And I would have to agree. I mean, that certainly is a big challenge, and making sure that you have a immutable, unchangeable copy that you can recover from is important. So not having to ever feel the need to pay because you have your data. You don't have to get it back. I come from a little bit of a different phase where Rubrik is obviously spending their effort in backing up the virtualization platforms, grossly generalized. I come from more of the Kubernetes space. Now, the challenge that I have in my world is that people think they don't need to back up their Kubernetes applications. There's a lot of misunderstanding in the world of Kubernetes that they think Kubernetes is it is self-repairing and you can't lose data. But if you have used the storage on your cluster to create a database, then you do need to back it up. And our general philosophy is always we have a local copy, but a local snapshot is not a backup unless we have a copy somewhere else, and we can even incorporate that into a immutable copy somewhere else. Very much like I'm sure Rubrik does.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to keep things rolling because I think this kind of connects in pretty nicely. And sorry, you know what? I want to pause very quickly and just let the audience know. The questions that we're asking today are actually coming from all of you. So what we did here is we asked folks, what are your biggest questions that you have when you're looking at a data protection platform, and kind of pulled out those key themes. And that's what these questions are based on. So all of these questions are coming directly from you and the questions that you had for our panelists today. But please do keep any additional questions coming in. So the next question that we were seeing folks from a lot of being asked from a lot of folks was, what can go wrong if you don't have the right data protection in place? So why is this so important? And Mark, let's go ahead and start with you again.
Yeah, well, it results in disruption to business, right? We've got data is the crown jewel of just about every business these days. So when that data is being held hostage or inaccessible, you're losing money, right? So the scope of how much that impacts you is going to depend on how quickly you can get that data back. So if you've not selected the right solution, and maybe you have things that went unprotected because they weren't part of what you selected, or if there's that age-old embarrassing thing, we forgot to protect that, right? Well, hopefully nobody's running into that these days, but it could happen. Or not having that immutable copy somewhere could put you in a position where the attacker has you completely under their control. So that would be, I think, what could be very wrong.
I have a couple of examples. One is currently a customer. Unfortunately, they were not a customer at the time. When I first started talking to them, they were investigating data protection for their Kubernetes environment. And they're a large aerospace company up in the Northeast. And they lived in both the world, they lived in Azure Government Cloud as well as Azure Commercial Cloud. And we chatted with them, said, okay, we want data protection. We're going to budget this for next year. This is in April, by the way, of last year. And they came back and said, okay, we're going to budget this for next year. We'll talk to you later. And then they came back to us in August and said, hey, can we talk about those licenses again? And said, okay, what happened? And they said, well, we had data loss. There's the putting your head down in shame. And essentially what had happened was they had snapshots of their data protection, of their applications. And they thought they could put Humpty Dumpty back together. So they knew when they went to the board and said, hey, we already had plans for this, but we didn't spend the money on it. So long story short, the board of directors gave an earful, but did do a emergency, out of sync approval for data protections. So the data was critical to that company, and obviously it was worth making the investment in data protection. So
yeah,
lose your data, lose the business.
Yeah, well, yeah, and Mark, you said something, maybe a bit tongue in cheek there too, of the embarrassment of, oh, we forgot to back that up. But I'm curious if you see more often that people, you forget, and we'll use that word, but I'm maybe more thinking like don't know, aren't aware, don't have the insight into their data. And so they've sort of lost the line of sight to it, and then it kind of slips off the radar. Or is it more often budgetary? And we're going to get into some of how you make this argument for budget and deprioritization. That is the problem. Is one more than the other, or kind of 6 and 1/2 dozen?
Well, first with the, forgetting, one of the things in practice that we always recommend is to have a hierarchical approach, right? You have some way of having a catch-all, so that if somebody instantiates a new workload, that there's some mechanism to automatically protect it, so that it's a specific exclude instead of specific include. You have to be careful with that, depending on what scale you're working at, because, you could end up accidentally protecting things that take up space you don't want to be taking up, and there's a cost to that. But in general, using a hierarchical approach is generally recommended. What was the second part of the question?
I guess just wondering if you're seeing more that it's that people don't see it, or that they deprioritize data protection, and if one of those you're finding a little bit more common than the other.
Yeah, I think definitely not seeing it. I think that these days, data protection, if it isn't being discussed even at the executive board, CISO levels, if it's not being discussed there, it should be.
Okay. I'm going to actually sneak in this question here that Peter just asked, wondering about the best practice for how often you should be testing your backups. And maybe Matt, do you want to speak to that, and then Mark?
As often as you have resources for. I mean, one of the biggest challenges you have in data protection is backing up is important. And Mark had made reference to, back in the day, he was a backup admin. I also have had my experience in, backing up physical tapes every day. And one of the managers I had, his motto was, hey, you miss a backup, you're fired. It is important that you have the backup done, but it is more important to have a strategy and practice your recovery. And depending on which platform you are, whether you're on VMware or the world of Kubernetes, those approaches are going to be different, and they're going to require documentation and practice. So if you have a DR scenario or you lose just one app, you need to be confident that you're going to be able to get that application up. And the only way we're going to do it is through practice. And if you notice in the background, I am a musician. The only way to get to Carnegie Hall is practice, practice, practice. And this applies to recovery as well. Mark, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, jumping on that, it's always good also to, test your backups, have that DR plan somewhere that's accessible, not requiring the environment that you're recovering to access the plan, right? And whenever possible, have multiple people involved in those tests. One of the practices, even going back to that first job is, I think I wrote that company's first ever DR plan, and we sent the whole crew down to Atlanta to our recovery data center, and had other people execute it to find those things that that I was thinking of when I wrote it, that I was maybe making assumptions on. Right. So getting that diversity of practice whenever possible, I think, is important as well. But yeah, back to the original point, as often as you have bandwidth for, and certainly anything is better than nothing. You'd be amazed how often we in the industry hear that people have not done these tests, or they say they have a plan, but they've never actually run through it.
And bonus content, you talked about having a plan. It is important that we were talking about ransomware. If you live in the world where your entire world got locked up by encryption, make sure you have a copy of that plan somewhere else outside the network, including all the information about your infrastructure. I believe the ransomware that hit the company Maersk, the big logistics shipping company, they had lost even their recovery plans. And the only reason they recovered is that they had one server that was physically turned off, so they were able to bring it back.
Yeah, I hear that from ransomware experts all the time. Is it sounds silly, but it's the printed copy. It's printed out and have a paper copy, and I think it's really hard with a lot of these things. It's so easy to put a little thought in and invest all this time in the plan, and then as you said, Mark, to not test it, or to not update it, or even update it once every couple of years, kind of a thing. But this is a constant and iterative process of adjustment and readjustment. I am going to move things along to our third question. What are the major benefits of finding the right data protection platform for your organization? So let's shake things up. We're going to start with Matt this time.
Well, in the world of Kubernetes, data protection is a little on the young side. While Kasten has been around since 2017, many of the other solutions out there have been around since 2019, 2020, 2021. So they don't have the same level of maturity. What you really need to do is really make sure that you have a solution that is going to ensure that you have a recoverable copy. We're talking about quiescing, or make sure we quiet that application. Because if you think about a database or any application, essentially is an open file. Like when you have Microsoft Word open, there's a lot of information that is in resident memory. It's in RAM. And in order to make sure you get a good, clean copy, you need a data protection solution that is able to quiesce or quiet that application for just a moment to get a good, clean copy. I say that because many of those solutions out there do not provide that same level of protection. And so just like we were talking about a moment ago, make sure you practice not only your backup, prove that it works, but also prove that you can recover. And your recovery will be completely dependent on making sure you get a good, clean, and recoverable copy.
Yeah, to jump on that too. Anyone who's listened to any of my other talks, a recurring theme is I always give the disclaimer that I'm not a doctor. I have no medical training. So anything that sounds like medical advice is just me looking out for your well-being because I care about you. But better sleep. You're going to get better sleep when you have better protection. You're going to have lower blood pressure. Your level of stress will go down when you can provide, that data, that evidence to your boss, your auditor, your board that, hey, we're safe and we can prove it.
Yeah, Mark, that's actually the first time that I've had anyone answer with that sort of human focused approach, and amen to that. I think that's a huge aspect because we talk about the human element all the time, and I think a lot of times we talk about it in this really the danger of the human element kind of way. Humans can really be a benefit to your and they're also an integral part of your security system protection and recovery. But if you are taking care, you're putting in all this energy and effort into tools, putting that same energy and effort into the humans, making sure that they're trained and capable and feel prepared and ready, doing those test runs. And then the payout is not just on the financial side, but it's also on that human side. It's sleeping better at night, not waking up in those cold sweats. And burnout is a big conversation we're talking about right now. So that's a huge benefit, and cool answers from both of you. I appreciate that. I'm going to move things to our fourth question here.
I want to circle back real quick on the last thing. Is another benefit is that you just alluded to is time savings. If you pick the right solution, you're going to spend less time managing it, which is going to help.
Absolutely.
So just wanted to toss that in here. You can go ahead and move on.
Very well said. Yes, that is an important thing that I think often does get forgotten, but is a direct line of sight to that bottom line. That's not an intangible value. You can put monetary dollars to that if you need to. I mean, ideally, and hopefully, you work for a company that values your well-being and your time and your sense of satisfaction in your job. But if that doesn't, necessarily make the argument you want, there's a line of sight through to finance on that as well, and that's important. Actually, I did not intend that as a segue, but here we are. This is perfect. How can we convince the decision makers on my team to invest in an enhanced or new data protection platform? So what are the arguments that we're going to be bringing to for anyone out there that has to bring this conversation to someone on their team and kind of pitch it? What is the argument that you would want to give them? And Matt, we'll start with you, and then Mark.
Well, it really comes down to, what are your requirements for SLAs for these workloads? And oftentimes in my world, Kubernetes is fairly new, and there may be some lack of awareness that those applications are out there or that they need to be protected, right? As I mentioned earlier, there are perceptions that everything in Kubernetes is stateless, but that is not necessarily true anymore. It's been not the case for 3 years now. So convincing them that they need to invest in it essentially is a matter of them doing their jobs, protecting their jobs, and making sure they can sleep well at night. Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. Whenever possible, decision makers want data, right? Feelings certainly influence this. The emotions of this is important, but getting quantification on what is the cost of downtime. How quickly do we need to be back up, and how much money are we losing every minute, every day that we're offline? Quantifying, and that's not just, because not only do you stop selling, you stop receiving too, right? Everything grinds to a halt when you're at the mercy of a ransomware, and making the point that even with perimeter protection, endpoint protection, user training, attacks are still getting through. They still happen. So I think that sometimes there's an attitude that this isn't going to happen to us, and making the point that it absolutely could happen to any organization, no matter how well prepared, on the prevention side, and providing data around that. There's all sorts of even. Rubrik recently started up. We have Zero Labs, which is it's a part of Rubrik, but they do independent research using not only existing data, customers, other research groups, but we have access to Rubrik telemetry. So it's some kind of interesting research that comes out of that. So I'll plug them real quick. That they just released this report that you can find on the Rubrik website that has a little bit of a fresh perspective because we have that telemetry data. If you're looking for data on how big is this risk and quantifying it, that could be a specific tool you can use to talk to those decision makers.
Okay, I like that. And that handouts tab actually has a link right to that website, so you can easily open that tab right now and kind of flag that for yourself for later. So I'm taking away from that the key data points are kind of proving the risk and proving the saving side of it. So I think there's a problem, and acknowledging that there's a problem, and that that there is opportunity to save both time and money and resources and not be stopped. So proving that the problem exists and that the solutions exist. Anything else that you would add?
The headlines, I had just thought of something.
Yeah.
Does anyone recall that the airlines went down in all of North America recently?
I remember that.
Yeah. Air traffic control system.
That was a bad backup.
Oh, well, there you go.
It was a bad restore. That I don't know the exact. It was an ancient system, so certainly I am very confident that Veeam and Rubrik were not involved in this. But it was a bad restore. They restored something over an existing. They had data loss, and the result was I got stranded in Toronto, as well as everyone else across the United States.
Yes. Yeah, that's a great.
What is the cost of that? To come back to the question, how do you quantify the billions of dollars lost in like a day and a half of travel? Like, they shut down all flights.
Yeah, and reputation, and I mean, obviously we all still need to fly, and that's a whole other soapbox I could get on, and how annoying that is. But yeah, I mean, that's a hit monetarily. It's a hit to your reputation. It's a hit to the people that day. That's a great example, and one that I think we can all relate to. We all remember that, whether we were flying or a friend of ours was, or we were just reading it on the news.
That backup admin did not sleep well that night.
No. I'm going to pull some questions from the audience now, because this is an interesting one that a lot of folks are wondering about in terms of compliance. There's a lot of industries out there where they need to think about different regulatory compliance issues. So Linma is wondering how they can ensure that a platform that they're looking at is going to meet their regulatory and compliance requirements and providing the sufficient security and encryption features that they need.
I'll start on that one. And I'm going to give a very industry generic answer that in most cases, solutions are not out of the box compliant. They are compliant ready is usually the term that we use, where we have solutions to answer those questions. And it's still up to the organization to answer those questions for their own auditors, for their own compliance. So there's very few, we're going to buy this and then we've checked the box that we're compliant, right? That's just not the way compliance in the industry works. That said, yeah, most companies are also going to have teams that can help with that too, where if you have, hey, I'm trying to answer this question for my auditors and I'm not sure how, you can get help on those specific questions. And it's part of that is there's so many different compliances, so many different industries, that it's hard to have those boxes checked going into it. But they're like I said, it's usually compliant ready in ways that we can answer those questions tailored to that industry.
Mark, I'm glad you took that question first. That was a good answer, because the answer is classic. Architect, engineer, it depends. It depends on what your requirements are, what your SLAs are, and making sure that the product or platform that you choose is capable of fulfilling all those requirements.
Yeah, that it depends answer is, I think it could be seen as frustrating, but I'm hoping that a lot of people take that as opportunity, because usually it's an opportunity to find the customization if you have a team that's willing to work with you. So Mark, something you said that I think is really important is, it's compliance ready, if not, that checkbox, and then it's a conversation. So that's a great, thing to add onto your vetting process when you're working or looking at a new solution, a new vendor, is how easy is it for me to get information? How easy are these conversations I'm having, and how much support am I getting along the way through that conversation to make sure that you can hit that, it depends answer in the way that you want.
Yeah, I think that in a roundabout way answers another question I see here, about having data protection solution transferring the risk to the solution provider. And the answer is really, it's no, it doesn't transfer the risk. Because at the end of the day, you as the representative of your organization, you're responsible for making sure that you've done your due diligence. And again, there's not that easy button for compliance, unfortunately. But certainly, I think that as vendors, we want to partner with our customers to make sure that we're helping in that journey.
Yeah, I'm glad you pulled that out, because I saw that as well, and I think that is something that a lot of people wonder about. Is so like, I'm done now, right? I plugged the thing in, and I'm good. And no, there's still. It's important to make sure that you've gone through this, and especially when compliance is on the table. I'm going to move things along here to our next question, which actually, wow, you guys are really segueing quite nicely here. Are there any industry-specific considerations? And one of the questions that we do get a lot is people wondering about size of organization, wondering if a solution makes sense for them, if they're very small, and maybe even nonprofit is one that comes up a lot, through to that large enterprise, and how big can you protect, and how much can you handle? So how, and obviously I don't expect you guys to be able to answer for each one of those categories, but how should organizations be approaching questions around that, and making sure that the solution is going to fit well for them?
In the world of Kubernetes, the challenge we have is that many of those that are very young on their journey to Kubernetes. And just to back up a little bit, what is Kubernetes? It's essentially a new platform to deploy applications. I would say it's the next generation platform where virtualization has probably hit beyond its peak in its growth, where Kubernetes is on its ramp up. So in the world of Kubernetes, there's a lack of resources, a lack of expertise is the biggest challenge. So choosing a solution that makes it easier for you to manage is really critical. So ease of use, making sure that you have compliance reporting, and no matter how small or large the organization, you still have very granular role-based access control, meaning each user has the correct level of access to back something up or restore. As we talked about earlier, a restoration can be destructive. So we want to make sure that user that is doing the restore has the correct level of access, correct level of rights. So whether small or large, you choose a solution that's going to make it easier for your staff to manage. Mark, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think we've kind of already talked about industry-specific considerations. There's different regulatory compliances. I think sizing. Yeah, looking at where are you starting at this point in this new solution, and where are you going to be in the next 3-5 years, and making sure that as you grow, the solution is going to be able to grow with you is going to be important also. That we're especially enterprise more and more is being asked to operate like a cloud, and we hear a lot about as a service type offerings, even for internal enterprise, right? So that what is the elasticity of the solution, and how are we going to be able to grow and shrink it? And I think especially with cloud, if you're all in the cloud, then your days of forklift upgrades on anything are gone. But that can still be the case for your on-prem workloads. So trying to bridge that gap between operating as a cloud and living in a hybrid cloud world.
Sorry, that I instantly got a Madonna song stuck in my head. I'm hearing Material Girl now with the hybrid cloud world. It's Friday. I don't know. My brain's in a weird place today. I really like that. I'm wondering, so in terms of, I think a lot of times it's the questions you don't know to ask. So what I'm hearing is that people should ask about scalability and make sure that, especially if they are a smaller team with intentions to grow, that it's going to be able to scale, or if their needs are more simple now, but they anticipate them being more complicated, or potentially, needing to pull back in. So scalability and agility being important there, customization being important, making sure that you can customize to any compliance or regulatory things that might come up. Certainly, if you are exploring something like Kubernetes, what I'm hearing, Matt, from you is maybe making sure that you fully understand. And if you don't understand, finding someone who can kind of help you get an understanding of Kubernetes. Is there anything else you would put on that list in terms of if you're trying to evaluate if there's an industry risk, or if there's something specific to your organization that you should know about, that you should be asking these vendors? Is there any question that we sort of missed there?
I actually do have one. It's a sub area of finance. I do cover a lot of Canada. I do cover all of Canada for my patch. And for some reason, the Canadians are a little bit more progressive when it comes to the adoption of Kubernetes. And in spending time in, I think it was the AWS Summit in Toronto last summer, I had learned that the Canadian federal government has been telling the finance industry that you don't need to leave your current hyperscaler, but you do need a plan to migrate. And it's a pretty serious one if you consider that any given finance company, look at any of the major big banks up there, they had probably chosen their hyperscaler. So for some reason, Canada is a little bit more Azure focused, versus in the US, I see it as a little bit more AWS. But they basically say, hey, Azure's fine. We don't mind you playing with Microsoft, but we don't even want you beholden to this one company. And you need to have a plan to leave to someone else. Don't care who. So there are some interesting requirements that are industry specific, and backup and can be part of that migration plan potentially.
That's really cool. All right, Canada. I'm going to move to our next question. And before we jump into the question, I'm going to jump to an audience question here from Jeffrey, wondering about maybe, and actually, this kind of came in around the time when we were talking about the archaic system from the airline causing these problems. And so Jeffrey's wondering, well, okay, so when we're talking data protection for these older archaic systems, are there current data protection solutions able to protect that? And so what I'm kind of wondering around that is, are we keeping a legacy system and layering around it, or is it, because there are some places where the easy answer would be no, get rid of all this archaic and outdated stuff. But I know a lot of governments and older organizations, they don't have that option. So how are you plugging into those older legacy systems?
I'll start. I think, without disparaging some of those old systems that are, around by some, necessity, a lot of times they're kind of held together by duct tape and bubble gum. And,
yes.
I think in general, it doesn't behoove the industry to maintain very close integration with those, right? Because, we have to be ready for the next thing. So I think that's going to be, going back to the engineering architecture question, it depends. I think that's going to be a very specific case by case, discussion with the vendor, potentially, even looking at professional services to get into those custom solutions. And usually, I want to say most vendors are going to have some sort of catch-all type of protection that's, it's not the best way to protect anything, but it's a way to protect almost everything.
Interesting. There's, I've had some recent conversations in talking about, my world, I'm not necessarily worried about VMs, or at least I didn't think I was, but now there is a new project called KubeVirt, and it converts VMs to Kubernetes, to containers. And I've joked laughingly about this, that we've all talked about Windows 95, Windows 98, 2000 being around forever on your ATM machines, and they just went from physical to virtual, and who knows, maybe they'll end up in a Kubernetes container somewhere. But, in the end, those older applications are either going to be bridged to that new technology, meaning you're basically, by moving your VM to the cloud, you didn't really change anything at all. You just moved it. You're bridging the gap. But the better choice is to start with cloud native, meaning, okay, leave all your older systems in place. Don't put the effort to re-engineer them to the new cloud model, whether it be on-prem or in public cloud. What you need to do is basically try and create all new workloads to be cloud native, and start with that position, and don't worry about as much on the. It will give you the opportunity to start building the new modern infrastructure, as opposed to keep patching the old stuff and forcing it into the old method of doing things, which is only going to make your life more difficult in the end and more expensive.
Yeah, it's a common phrase that I've been hearing lately is, all businesses get disrupted, and it's a question of whether it happens externally or internally, right? Ooh. If it happens externally, that's going to be detrimental, to the business. But if you're able to disrupt yourself, and have a plan and move forward with that, you're going to be able to adapt to those changes as they come. So embracing, internal disruption, I think, is an important thing for any organization to be able to do.
That I love that. That I think is a very powerful takeaway, is the disruption is coming. We're either owning it internally or it's coming from the outside. And Eric just chimed in and said that, it's a good excuse to start fresh. And yeah, yes. I think, if you can, and I understand, I have some friends who work for the federal government, and their systems are terrifying. I mean, I'm sure they're very protected, and please don't get me in trouble with the government, but it's so old and bulky, and it's just like, and making that change. Or a friend of mine works for Canadian Tire, and they were still sending out all their training on DVDs because they were dealing with so many different locations that had so many different bandwidth issues and ways to access, and how do you reach all the different people, and so they couldn't have the online training programs that they wanted to have, and it just feels overwhelming. It feels like too heavy of a lift, and I think sometimes it's just doing it.
You just mentioned sending out DVDs. There is sometimes the idea of doing things the old way. Doing things the old way just because you always have. Yes. I worked at EMC in a previous life, and at one point they were trying to teach their customers about the cloud, the virtues of the cloud. So this is a long time ago when, what is the cloud? It's ephemeral. And they ended up shipping their training DVDs to New Zealand and Australia. There was a whole bunch of irony that they were physically shipping DVDs to places across the planet. And then they end up getting a $500,000, multi-million-dollar import duty. And this all should have been streamed talking about the cloud. I love the irony of the
How many free hours did those come with?
Lots of free hours.
Not to mention, I'm actually curious whether or not they even worked, because I know I've bought Australian DVDs and they don't play in American DVD players. This is now we're all dating ourselves. Who's buying DVDs anymore? But yes, and actually,
this is probably a decade plus ago.
Yes, right, yeah, fair. Well, actually, you're segueing nicely as we talk about the cloud here. And so, are there any environment? And I feel like we keep coming back to you have to ask questions and you have to find the customization. And so obviously that is a part of what we're talking about today. But what considerations should people be taking into account when they're thinking about the different existing environments that they have in terms of on-prem, public cloud, private cloud, hybrid, environment to environment? Are there different concerns that should be top of mind? And maybe Mark, if you want to start us out, and then Matt.
Sure. It changes your risk posture a little bit. There are different vectors to be considered. There are different performance considerations, right? As you're looking at, on-prem versus cloud. And then there's, potential management sprawl. Are you going to, because you're using 2 or 3 different platforms, are you also going to be using 2 or 3 different protection platforms, or can that be consolidated? So the more sprawl you have, the larger attack footprint you've got. So there's that. Being able to manage it in as few tools as possible, I think, is important, and making sure that you're aware of the ways that cloud security can differ from on-prem security, and just being educated on those differences, and following best practices in both cases, which can be a little different.
I'm going to take this question from a little bit of a different slant. So when talking about those environments, make sure that you do understand the requirements for whatever data protection platform you're running. Let's talk about the on-prem versus cloud. On-prem, you have a finite amount of I/O, CPU power, RAM storage, etc. It is physically limited to, the general rule is, try not to use any more than 70, 80% utilization for any given one of those. CPU, RAM, storage, doesn't really matter. Once you get beyond that 70, 80%, you're basically saturated and everything else is going to slow down. On-prem, you have a physical limitation. In the cloud, you don't. And this creates a new problem. I call it the blank check problem. And that every site resource or site reliability engineer, or SRE in the world of Kubernetes, their only goal is, I want my app to be fast. So what do? Turn all the dials to 11, 10 max, right? And yes, their applications are going to be quick, but at what cost? Because essentially, the more you turn those up, the more exponential those charges are going to be. And I did see another question from Satyam. I'm going to kind of pull this one back in. How fast to recover? Well, it depends on how much you're paying for, right? How fast will it be? Well, how much CPU, RAM, and storage did you invest in on your infrastructure? Or did you remove the limits of what AWS or Azure is giving you? Are you bursting to those type of events? So unfortunately, back to the engineering, I'm going to answer the question, how fast can we recover the data? It depends on your solution and depends on the resources available. And a big part of that is, how fast is your disk? How fast is the cloud? Network, storage, RAM, CPU available. So hopefully I was able to address all of those environmental questions.
Yeah, and Mark, do you want to chime in on Satyam's question as well in terms of speed?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing is determining how fast you need, right? Scoping it. What are the requirements from those application owners, and then you can go out and find, start doing, research into how fast these can happen. We've got Rubrik, for example, has live mount capabilities. So in the case of virtual machines, instant, right? We can spin it up from a backup using Rubrik as a storage, and it's there immediately. Is that going to be the use case for every single restore? Probably not. So it depends. What are your requirements? What is your scale, and what's your budget?
Yeah, we can always pay for faster.
Yeah.
SLAs are absolutely must be. You must go by your SLA. Understand what is the expectation for your recovery, your RPO and RTO times. Where does that recovery need to be? So Mark had pointed out about recovering locally. I'm assuming from a snapshot of sorts. But if you lost your whole data center, then you need to recover somewhere else. And that's going to have a different SLA if you're local versus recovering elsewhere.
Yeah, as much as we talk about cyber recovery, traditional disaster recovery is still a requirement. There are still floods and earthquakes and fires.
Yeah, I kind of joke about talking about any major hardware vendor, like whether it's the guys with the orange and white logos or the guys with the blue and white logos, they're all running Kubernetes in all of their stores across the United States. And I can guarantee you that both companies have had floods in Florida. Just, I don't even have to be that well educated in that, because I know Florida gets hit with hurricanes on a regular basis. And I guarantee you they've lost one or two Home Depot or Lowe's. So make sure that you are planning for that DR, because we assume it's not going to happen, but we have to make sure that we have the insurance to get back on our feet.
All right. Well, we are getting down to our last 10 minutes, which is shocking because this has just flown by. So I'm going to start jumping around in our questions a little bit. So if you're counting along with me, we're about to take a little bit of a leap forward. But what I'm wondering here is where to start. So you guys have given us some great questions that we should be asking vendors, some things we should be thinking about. But if anyone's feeling a little overwhelmed, and I apologize, I forget which one of you said this at the beginning, but one of you said, do something. Just make sure that you're not doing nothing. So if it's a do something, what is the first do something? And Mark, maybe you want to kick us off.
Sure. Scope. It's scoping your environment, knowing what you need to protect, getting buy-in from application owners on, again, what's the cost of downtime, what are the retention needs, what's the frequency need. Knowing, that data is going to help whoever you're working with size it, as far as what the solution looks like. Starting there and knowing your environment first, I say is where to start. And then, from there, look at, what are the value adds, what are the unique propositions for each vendor, and how do those align with your goals as a business? Are your needs relatively basic, or your budget relatively basic, and backup and restore is enough, or do you need to go further down the rabbit hole, get to super low RTOs or a lot of intelligence around that data, and just look at where do those align with your business needs.
That was perfect. I mean, as Mark pointed out, know your SLAs, know your RPO and RTO times, your recover point objective, recover time objective, which should be defined within that SLA from your organization, and make sure that you have the basics for reporting, alerting, notifications, ease of use, single use console, that type of thing. Great job, Mark.
I'm gonna ask this question. It is a little bit maybe loaded or dangerous, so I'll ask you to be not vendor specific in your answers, but Gilbert is wondering if there's any red flags that you would suggest that people keep in mind, that if they saw a specific, if they had a specific experience or there was a specific lack of a feature or something like that, is there any red flag that you would identify that would make you take a second look, again without getting too specific about it?
Make sure you see a live demo and test it for yourself.
That I'll throw in another one. Nothing is free.
Ooh.
All right. If something is free, there's a cost to it somewhere.
Okay. All right. You got, both of you got a couple of high fives from the audience on that one. So yeah, I think you may have hit some chords there. Well, all right. So as we near our wrap up time here, I do want to ask you both to tell us. Now, we've heard a lot of great ways that we should be looking at different solutions. And both of you have kind of mentioned a few things about your specific solutions and how they can kind of help folks. But let's get into it now. So what specifically with Rubrik, what specifically by Cast and by Veeam, do you think is sort of that key unique and something that would make somebody get really excited to jump in with either of you? And let's kick it off with Rubrik.
Sure. Some of the things that, we've talked about, having that single pane of glass. Rubrik has Rubrik Security Cloud, which protects on-prem, cloud-native SaaS workloads all in one management plane. And we're protecting on-prem workloads on-prem from a data plane perspective, cloud-native workloads natively in the cloud, and being able to do more with that data. So we have sensitive data discovery to determine, where, if you've got credit card information, PHI, you can find out where it is and make sure that it's being protected. in the event of ransomware, you can determine what your blast radius is using these tools and see what the overlap is. And one of the very cool things we have is threat hunting. Based on the backup data, is you can look for indicators of compromise through your historical backup data points. So instead of having to spin up those systems and do forensics, you can search all the backup data iteratively to get to that. So a lot of really cool security add-ons. I want to be respectful of Matt's time to give him a chance. But single pane of glass, security posture, and enhanced tools to help you do recover in the event of attack.
Thanks, Mark. So I'll speak a little bit about Kasten. So as some of you may or may not be aware, Kasten was acquired by Veeam over 2 years ago. And at the time, Veeam was aware that data protection for Kubernetes was going to be a quickly growing market. And we've grown 900% in 21 and 300% in 22. Kasten is unique in that we have the most experience in this market. We're founded in 2017. Kubernetes was invented in 2015. We have literally 2 to 3x more experience than anyone out in the market. The majority of the market out there is based on some open source software called Valero. I kind of call it the equivalent of using Xcopy to back up your applications. It's not backup. It's just a copy. It's not going to automate or anything. So Kasten provides a easy to use cloud native solution. Cloud native means it belongs in there. It's designed for the cloud. And that also means that it's easy for the IT operations folks to be able to manage, know that their backups are getting done, getting compliance, reporting, alerting, etc. But on the other hand, you also have a cloud native solution that allows the developers to use all the native APIs. So in the world of Kubernetes, it's this one command called kubectl or kubectl. And that means they can run kubectl commands or the APIs against and integrate Kasten into the development cycle. So I'll agree with Mark. Single pane of glass, ease of use. Make sure that you have full control as well as very good security, role-based, very granular role-based access control. So make sure each person has the right access to do what they need to. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. I am available up on LinkedIn. You'll notice I am Matt LeBlanc, Boston.
That's perfect, Matt, actually, because the next thing I wanted to ask you was how somebody should reach out if they do want to get started. So let's kick it back to you, Matt, and then Mark, if you can chime in and give us an idea, what that first step is if we want to jump in and learn a little bit more or get rolling with Kasten by Veeam and then Rubrik.
Sure.
Matt, that's you.
So you can always reach out to me. My email address is matt.leblanc@veeam.com. First step is really to engage us. We'll be able to give you a live demonstration, show you what it looks like in your environment. Kasten is unique that we support any version of Kubernetes across any cloud and or on-prem with a single pane of glass with just about any storage infrastructure. So if you want to reach out, we can arrange a demo, and our software is available for deployment today. You can get it in your environment and have a community-based license that does not expire. So you can use it in your environment with very little cost or for no cost to you just to start. Mark?
Yeah. Probably the best is you visit Rubrik.com. We've got a get started link to get set up with a demo. And in a little less than a month now, Rubrik's having our virtual event Forward, where if you want to get all the information about what's current, what's coming, what makes us different, there's 2 days of content there, including something kind of cool. We got Ryan Reynolds that's going to be on there with us. Yeah, that should be entertaining. And yeah, like I said, that event, or you can feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm there too. I'm as far as I know, I'm the only Mark Crevier in the world. So
I'm not the only Matt LeBlanc.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can learn all about our security immutability story, our cloud first approach to cloud native protection. So it's all good stuff, and hope to hear from you.
Those are all good things. Plus Ryan Reynolds. And today we got to talk to Matt LeBlanc. So everyone go tell your friends you hung out with Matt LeBlanc this morning. Well, this has been a lot of fun, guys. I do want to say we got a couple of high fives, and Jeffrey wanted you to know that he thought this was a very educational discussion. I would agree, Jeffrey. I have learned a ton and really enjoyed chatting with you both. It's fun to kind of step outside the usual confines of just presentation and the slides and things, and just kind of get into things a little bit. So I want to thank you both for taking the time to come and discuss with us, and for joining us on the PanelCast.
Yeah, thank you very much. Detroit pizza.
Yes. Oh, yes. Reach out to Mark if you want to talk about Detroit pizza, and Matt if you want to talk about race car driving and rock music. That's your takeaway. All right, folks. Well, thanks to you both, and hopefully we get to chat again soon.
Have a great weekend, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, and I do want to remind you all that if you asked a question that we didn't get to in the session, and I know there was quite a few that are still coming in, and right at the end, you guys all got your hit of coffee and all the questions started pouring in. So since we didn't have time to get to all of those, we are going to make sure that those go to our speakers, to Rubrik, to Casting by Veeam. So you will get some answers from those questions. So please do keep those coming in. We'll make sure that those get some answers back. And Brian is saying Ryan Reynolds, that should be awesome. Yes, I would love to go hang out with Ryan Reynolds. So I'm hoping maybe I can scam my way into that session. But also, I really, really enjoy. I would say that I'm equally as excited to talk to all of you every day and every week. And I'm not being hyperbolic. I really enjoy chatting with all of you and wrapping up a week with all of you. This has been a lot of fun to explore today. Now, for those of you counting along at home, you're saying to yourself, well, it's about time for a prize giveaway. Speaking of fun, let's go ahead and do that. So before I give away our $250 Amazon gift card, I'm going to remind you to head on over to the handouts tab. If you forgot about it in all of the information today, a reminder to go back, click on those links, make sure you get those resources. Rubrik has a whole host of resources for you on their website. And the Casting by Veeam is one of the By Dummies books, and I just love those. They're such a fun and engaging way to interact with information. So go check those out. But now, prize giveaway. So $250 Amazon gift card going to someone who is here live and present at the PanelCast, and that someone is Eric Lenhart from Texas. Eric Lenhart of Texas, you have won a $250 Amazon gift card. Now, as always, we will be in touch about claiming your prize after we wrap, so stay tuned for that. Well, with that, folks, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to once again thank Rubrik and Casting by Veeam for making this PanelCast possible. A giant thank you again to both Matt and to Mark for leading such an interesting and interactive conversation with all of us here today. I hope that you all enjoyed the panel discussion as much as I did. I hope that you were feeling powered up to start some more research of your own, because sessions like these, they're just the start, right? This is the jumping off point. We're giving you some ideas, giving you some things to look at. And now you get to head out and make that a reality. You get to go start having those conversations with your team and with these other vendors and getting to know. And I hope that you will all follow up with Rubrik and with Casting by Veeam, because, obviously we're just kind of scratching the surface today, and there's so much more to learn. And as we talked about, start with those demos and jump in and really kind of get in and start exploring these solutions. So with that, whether it's another PanelCast, maybe a tech talk, an expert series session, a summit, a megacast, a democast, an ecocast, whatever you've got on your calendar, I cannot wait to see you all at a webinar again soon. And until then, I hope you have an absolutely beautiful rest of your day. Happy Friday to you all.